Hi, welcome to today's story in our series Read Books. Dad Reads Books. And this story is titled Listen to the Wind. And it's from this book. You know, this book is a collected short stories of Ruskin Bond. You are familiar with this. We have been reading many stories from this. These are all stories from the colonial times around 150 to 200 years before now, or even earlier. During the period when the British were ruling India, India was a colony of Britain, and the main people there were the Englishmen who ruled the country. They were the officers, they were the authorities, they were all the people. And their children used to go to school in schools and colleges in India. And these stories have a background of that. And these Englishmen usually settled and lived in the high altitudes, in the foothills of the Himalayas in northern India. Southern India was very hot for them, and even the northern plains were very hot, humid. But the northern mountains, Himalayas and the foothills, were quite pleasant for them, and there were many locations where they could set up their communities and have their own life. It was essentially a English white man dominated community with the local Indians serving as fetchers of wood, hewers of wood, and carriers of water. The labor. So here it is that Ruskin Bond is telling us about this place. This story is titled Listen to the Wind. And it goes like this. March is probably the most uncomfortable month in the hills. The rain is cold, often accompanied by sleet and hail, and the wind from the north comes tearing down the mountain passes with tremendous force. Those few people who pass the winter in the hill station remain close to their fires. If they can't afford fires, they get into bed. I found old Miss Mackenzie tucked up in bed with 3 hot water bottles for company. I took the bedroom's single easy chair, and for some time, Miss Mackenzie and I listened to the thunder and watched the play of the lightning. The rain made a tremendous noise on the corrugated tin roof, and we had to raise our voices in order to be heard. The hills looked blurred and smudgy when seen through the rain-spattered windows. The wind battered at the doors and rushed round the cottage, determined to make an entry. It slipped down the chimney, but stuck there choking and gurgling and protesting helplessly. There's a ghost in your chimney and he can't get out, I said. Then let him stay there, said Miss Mackenzie. A vivid flash of lightning lit up the opposite hill, showing me for a moment a pile of ruins which I never knew were there. You're looking at Burnt Hill, said Miss Mackenzie. It always gets the lightning when there is a storm. Possibly there are iron deposits in the rocks, I said. I wouldn't know, but it's the reason why no one ever lived there for long. Almost every dwelling that was put up was struck by lightning and burned down. I thought I saw some ruins just now. Nothing but rubble. When they were first settling in the hills, they chose that spot. Later, they moved to the site where the town now stands. Burnt Hill was left to the deer and the leopards and the monkeys, and to its ghosts, of course. Oh, so it's haunted too. So they say on evenings such as these. But you don't believe in ghosts, do you? No, do you? No, but you'll understand why they say the hill is haunted when you hear its story. Listen. I listened, but at first I could hear nothing but the wind and the rain. Then Miss Mackenzie's clear voice rose above the sound of the elements, and I heard her saying, "It's really the old story of ill-starred lovers, only it is true." I had met Robert at his parents' house some weeks before the tragedy took place. He was 18, tall and fresh-looking, and full of manhood. He had been born out here, but his parents were hoping to return to England when Robert's father retired. His father was a magistrate, I think, but that hasn't any bearing on the story. Their plans didn't work out the way they expected, you see. Robert fell in love, not with an English girl, mind you, but with a hill girl, the daughter of a landholder from the village behind Burnt Hill. Even today, it would be unconventional. 25 years ago, it was almost unheard of. Robert liked walking, and he was hiking through the forests when he saw, or rather heard her. It was said later that he fell in love with her voice. She was singing, and the song, low and sweet and strange to his ears, struck him to the heart. When he caught sight of the girl's face, he was not disappointed. She was young and beautiful. She saw him and returned his awestruck gaze with a brief, fleeting smile. Robert, in his impetuousness, made inquiries at the village, located the girl's father, and without much ado asked for her hand in marriage. He probably thought that a sahib would not be refused such a request. At the same time, it was really quite gallant on his part, because any other young man might simply have ravished the girl in the forest. But Robert was in love and therefore completely irrational in his behavior. Of course, the girl's father would have nothing to do with the proposal. He was a Brahmin, and he wasn't going to have the good name of his family ruined by marrying off his only daughter to a foreigner. Robert did not argue with the father, nor did he say anything to his own parents, because he knew their reaction would be one of shock and dismay. They would do everything in their power to put an end to his madness. But Robert continued to visit the forest. You see that heavy patch of oak and pine? He often came across the girl, for she would be gathering fodder or fuel. She did not seem to resent his attentions, and as Robert knew something of the language, he was soon able to convey his feelings to her. The girl must at first have been rather alarmed, but the boy's sincerity broke down her reserve. After all, she was young too, young enough to fall in love with a devoted swain without thinking too much of his background. She knew her father would never agree to a marriage, and he knew his parents would prevent anything like that happening. So they planned to run away together. Romantic, isn't it? But it did happen. Only they did not live happily ever after. Did their parents come after them? I asked. No, they had agreed to meet one night in the ruined building on Burnt Hill. The ruin you saw just now, it hasn't changed much except that there was a bit of roof to it then. They left their homes and made their way to the hill without any difficulty. After meeting, they planned to take the little path that followed the course of a stream until it reached the plains. After that, but who knows what they had planned, what dreams of the future they had conjured up. The storm broke soon after they reached the ruins. They took shelter under the dripping ceiling. It was a storm just like this one, a high wind and great torrents of rain and hail, and the lightning flitting about and crashing down almost every minute. They must have been soaked, huddled together in a corner of that crumbling building when lightning struck. No one knows at what time it happened. But next morning, their charred bodies were found on the worn yellow stones of the old building. Miss Mackenzie stopped speaking, and I noticed that the thunder had grown distant and the rain had lessened, but the chimney was still coughing and clearing its throat. That is true, every word of it, said Miss Mackenzie. But as to Burnt Hill being haunted, that's another matter. I have no experience of ghosts. Anyway, you need a fire to keep them out of the chimney, I said, getting up to go. I had my raincoat and umbrella, and my own cottage was not very far away. Next morning, when I took the steep path up to Burnt Hill, the sky was clear, and though there was still a stiff wind, it was no longer menacing. An hour's climb brought me to the old ruin. No, now nothing but a heap of stones, as Miss Mackenzie had said. Part of a wall was left, and the corner of a fireplace. Grass and weeds had grown up through the floor, and primroses and wild saxifrage flowered among the rubble. Where had they sheltered, I wondered, and the wind tore at them. As the wind tore at them and the fire fell from the sky, where had they sheltered? I touched the cold stones, half expecting to find in them some traces of the warmth of human contact. I listened, waiting for some ancient echo, some returning wave of sound that would bring me nearer to the spirits of the dead lovers. But there was only the wind coughing in the lovely pines. I thought I heard voices in the wind, and perhaps I did. For isn't wind the voice of the undying dead? That's the story. It's a very little story. It's nice. I hope you liked it. Bye bye.